Good. Ready to go. Everyone hear me? We're good?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't know if I'll use the pulpit. It's a tripping hazard. But just a little bit of background for you guys. We're going to have fun today. I'm going to ask you one favor, though, for the next 20, 25 minutes, for however long I speak. And that's simply to be present in the room. Forget about work that starts tomorrow. Forget about having to get up early. Forget about the great food that's going to be at Grandma's after. And just be here. Everything else is taken care of. For the next 30 minutes, this is all that matters. Now, as Pastor Desmond told you, originally how this all got started was I came to church with Grandma Millie. I told her, Grandma, I'm feeling like called. I can call to speak to people. I feel like I've been given a gift to speak to people. Well, the next thing you know, I'm sitting with Pastor Desmond in his office, and I'm thinking I'm going to speak, for like 5 minutes about, the youth group that we work with at school, or the Bible study that we started. And he tells me, well, you're going to be preaching the whole sermon. The whole sermon. Well, ever since that moment, I've been praying, God, this is a big deal. I don't know what to say. And my dad asked me, what are you going to say? I don't know. So I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. About 5 days ago, I finally decided what to talk about. Well, then the doubt came in of, I don't even know if this is what I'm supposed to talk about. So I started praying, God, I need to know. I need to know. And you need to make this clear to me because I'll mess it up if you don't. I need to know for sure. Well, 2 days ago, I'm riding in the car with my brother, and he looks at me and he says, Brandon, every day I try to plan out my day. Like, I'm going to wake up at this time, then I'm going to have breakfast, and then I'm going to go to work, and I got to do this, and I got to do this, and then afterwards I'm going to come home and I'm going to work out. I plan the whole day, and it never works. He said, and I read my devotional, and it said, I just need to follow God's plan. I just need to let God control what happens. Well, a few days before that, I had written an entire sermon on following God's plan. So I thought that was a pretty cool sign. Yesterday, I'm looking online, checking Twitter, and one of my best friends from back at school tweets a Bible verse, word for word, one of the Bible verses I'm using today. Okay, I'm getting it, God. I got it. And then just to nail it further that he's in control. Again, I'm online later, and I get the exact verse that's my main verse for today. And then I wake up, and Grandma tells me, yeah, I'm planning this whole barbecue, and I just got to let it go and let God's plan take over. And Grandma had no clue what I was talking about. And then sure enough, I come to church, and we start singing songs, and it's basically what I'm preaching on today. So, water.
Amen.
But just to let you guys know a little bit about myself, this past calendar year has been the most incredibly spirit-filled year of my life. Blessings you wouldn't even believe. As far as playing college football and graduating, getting my bachelor's degree, getting accepted into the grad school, this is where I wanted to go. Deeper relationships with teammates and friends, and just having so much fun. But this journey that began a year ago didn't begin with happiness. And in fact, it began with heartbreak. And that's the thing, is about a year ago to the day, I was laying in bed crying, having just gotten broken up with on a 2.5-year relationship. Crying my eyes out. Just heartbroken, betrayed. And I remember I prayed a very simple prayer. I was very real with God. There was no faking it at that point. And I said, God, I don't know what else to tell you, but to put it lightly, this really stinks. And I have no clue what you're doing. But I'm just going to go with it and trust your plan. And perfectly, you look back, and I remember one of my best friends told me a Bible verse before that, and he said, it was in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9. It says, in their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. In their hearts, humans plan their course. I had my course planned, and man, did it crumble in front of me. I had thought I knew where I wanted to go to school, and then I wasn't having any fun at school. I wanted to transfer, and I called my parents crying, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. And then football, which I loved my whole life, wasn't fun. Everything that I planned, putting myself ahead of God, started to crumble. The girlfriend became the center of worship instead of God. God got cast aside, and I said I could do it on my own. And it all fell apart. Looking back, you can see now that moment of complete despair and heartbreak was God's way of saying, Brandon, you've been on this path. This is your own. It's not so great, is it? Follow me. And that's what I thought was so cool about singing today. It said, God called you by name. You. Each and every one in this room has been called. And it's not just a call, but there's a plan in place for each and every person in this room. And not just in this room, but everyone driving by on the street. Everyone in Granada Hills has a plan marked out by God. That's pretty cool. In fact, if you look in Romans chapter 12, verse 2, if any of you guys want to flip to it, I'll give you a second. So Romans chapter 12, verse 2. If you guys have it on your iPhones, want to flip through it, it's okay. Just don't text. That's a rule. But the verse says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but instead be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. His good, pleasing, and perfect will. It's not okay. It's not just some average plan. It is perfect. Absolutely perfect. In fact, if we go to Jeremiah 29, verse 11, we have a little bit more insight as to what God has planned for us. When it says, God has plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Now, I'm a major in exercise science, and I was doing research on patients and how they heal. And there is actually scientific research that a person with hope for a future not only heals faster, but they live longer. They're happier. And that's what God said. He said, I have hope for you. I'm going to give you hope. I'm going to give you a future. Now, when I first started writing this sermon, I said, that's well and good. But the question then becomes, well, how do you know what God's plan is? How do you know? I found an answer in Mark chapter 10. Jesus is telling his disciples, talking to them, he says, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it. We have to become like little children. So I started thinking back, what's it mean to be a child? And I remember the story, when I was about 7 years old, I was playing soccer. And I had just got this brand new soccer ball. If I remember right, we bought it at a 76 gas station, so probably not that expensive. But I got this soccer ball, and we're driving home. We just got done with soccer practice, and suddenly I realized that I don't have this ball. So I tell Mom, we have to turn around. Mom's frustrated. It's like, man, Brandon, you got to remember this stuff. So, we have to turn back around. Luckily, gas is only 99 cents or $1 at the time. If it's $4, I probably wouldn't be here right now. So we turn back around, and I remember praying, God, just please help that ball to be there. Just please, I'd really like you. Just let it be there. And it's like something so simple as a soccer ball I would pray about. Because I knew if I care about it, God's going to care about it too. Childlike faith. Just that belief that no matter what, God's going to have my back. And then I also started to think, and this is where the title of the sermon, Crossing the Road with Christ, came in. when you're a child, probably one of the most scary things in the world is crossing the street, because you got cars coming from this direction, and then you have cars coming from that direction, and you have no idea how it all works, and you have to like hit the button and then wait for the sign, and it's complicated. But the way to end all that, all the confusion, all the chaos, is to simply grab your parent's hand, and then it's all okay. There's no worries. We can go ahead in the slideshow a little bit, sorry. One more. There we go. So, we have this child who grasps his parents' hand, and then it's suddenly okay to cross the road. And then we get older, and it's like, okay, I don't need to hold your hand anymore. I'm a big boy. So you run across the street, and you try to beat that flashing red hand before it says stop, and you do all these things. But it's the same with our relationship with God. When you're a kid, it's so easy to hold on and pray, help me with that soccer ball. And then we get older, and it's like, God, I got it. I'm good. I can handle it on my own. And I started to listen when people talk, and you can really hear it, because I was even guilty of it. I would say, well, I got into Azusa Pacific. It was just perfect timing. Everything just fell into place. Everything just happens just right. Well, I'd like to think that God has perfect timing, and that God made everything fall into place. And with God, everything happens for a reason. But when we get older, we're so desperate to prove that we can do it on our own that we just take God out of it. And that's what it means to have that childlike faith. To just lean on God, to trust God, and to know that He has your back. Can we go one slide forward? Now, the next step in really knowing what God's plan is for you is simple. Become the feet of God. And again, to use a children's analogy, if you ever sat on your parents' feet and then they walked and you felt like you were walking on, out of control, and you were just saying, guide me, take me wherever you want to go. I want to feel what it's like to walk in your shoes. And that's the same thing. When we look at Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9, in their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. It's the same thing. It takes that childlike trust to just let it go and say, God, I'm going to hold on, and you're going to be in control. You're going to control where I go. And if we go back a little bit before in Proverbs 16, chapter 3, it says, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans. The answer is right there, how we know what God's plan is for us. You give it all to Him, He'll make it known, because He's going to establish what you have. He's going to establish the plan that you come up with. I was reading up on this topic, and one pastor said it perfectly. He said, if your plan doesn't align with God's plan, you sit in utter confusion with anxiety. I've been there before. You give everything to the Lord with childlike trust. He will establish your plans. And the next step is arguably the hardest step, because it's the most unnatural for us. Can we go one further? Cool. Simply, it's called carrying your cross. Found in Luke chapter 9, verse 23, Jesus is telling His disciples, you must deny yourselves and take up your cross daily and follow me. So, I was looking online for a way to illustrate this point, and I came across this comic. If you look back further in the comic, you see this man's carrying a cross, and he's just struggling across the desert, holding it, walking, and he starts to stumble. And finally, he looks to the heavens and says, God, the cross you gave me is a little too heavy. I could really, really use your help in lightening the load. So he walks up a little farther and he finds a saw. So he bends down and he starts sawing away. And he picks up the cross and he starts walking, and he's feeling good. Everyone around him has this big old cross, and he's feeling good. Then he starts to get a little bit tired again. So he prays, God, I would really appreciate it if you lighten this load again. It's getting a little too heavy. I just can't do it. So he pulls out the saw again, and he saws a little more off. He's happy, he's singing, everyone else is struggling and sweating, and he's doing great. Then he finds a canyon. And everyone else takes their cross and they set it down, and they walk across, and they cross to the other side. And he's left here in despair. And that's the thing that we often forget. Each day we have a cross to bear, whether it be a troubled relationship or you're having troubles at work, whatever it may be, we have a cross to bear. God does not promise us that we won't have to bear a cross, but there's a reason that we have to carry it. A lot of times we just don't figure out why we carry it until we get to the canyon. Like it says there, we complain about the cross we bear, but we don't realize it is preparing us for the dip in the road that God can see and we can't. God promises a safe landing, not a calm passage. I know when I read this, I began to look back on that breakup and think, that was the cross I was carrying. And it led me to this canyon that I needed to cross so I could get back on God's plan. Because as I realized, my plan and God's plan didn't cross. They were separate. My plan was never going to reach God's. I had to cross over to the other side. And that pain and suffering and heartbreak of that breakup was that cross to get me over. It's okay if you carry a cross. We don't know what it's for until we reach the canyon. And the next step, when you begin to realize that, okay, God's plan is going to be my plan, the next question then becomes, well, how do I follow God's plan? Because we've already established that God has a plan for each and every one of us, so that his plan is perfect. And now we're seeing, well, this is how I can tell what God's plan is. But then the next question becomes how you follow it. Well, luckily we go back to the Bible in Proverbs 16:6, and it basically tells you to avoid sin and walk in righteousness. Now in the Bible, sin is continually referred to as darkness. Righteousness is continually referred to as light. Just like Jesus is known as the light of the world. So if we take that, how do I know where God's plan is? How do I follow God's plan? Proverbs 16:6. Get out of darkness and turn on the light. This made me think of when you're in an airplane, when they tell you that in the event of a water landing, please hold on, and then your aisle will be lit to the exit row. It'd be a lot harder to find the exit row if they didn't have lights. It's the same thing with our faith. It's a lot harder to discern God's plan if you're walking in darkness. It's a lot easier to trip and fall. And it's a lot easier to stumble. But just like when you walk into a dark room and you turn on a light, it's a lot easier to find what you're looking for. Now, the question then is, how do I find the light? There's three things. The first one is prayer. Just like in any relationship, you need communication. To quote my brother, it's the most important part of a relationship. Thanks, Chad. Prayer. Just like when I was that little kid praying for that soccer ball, it was simple. I knew that God would answer. A lot of times it's still an answered prayer. In Matthew 21, verse 22, it says, if you believe, you will receive whatever you ask for in prayer. Part of that childlike faith is just asking. You can't have something if you don't ask. And it's the same thing in our relationship with God. We got to just let him know. And that's the first step in building that relationship. You want to seek God's light, a natural light of the world? Build a relationship with him. The light's a lot easier to see. The second part of that is read. I don't have the Bible up here with me. That's probably a first strike for a pastor. But read. We're talking about a path and a plan and a light. And you look in Psalm chapter 119, verse 105, and it says, your word is a lamp to my feet, a light to my path. A light to my path. At my school, I run Fellowship of Christian Athletes. It's just basically a Bible study. And people just say so often, yeah, I really want to read the Bible, but it's just hard to read, or I don't have time. And then they stumble. And they come back and say, I really need to get better at this, but the Bible's too hard to read. Your word is a lamp to my feet, a light to my path. It's basically a flashlight for your spiritual life. And then finally, how can you seek the light in your life to guide your path? Seek counsel of other believers. In Proverbs chapter 15, verse 22, it says, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. Can we go to the next slide? We're going to get back to our little friend. Somehow he worked his way away from the canyon. But he's looking through his telescope and he says, it seems like God is too far away from me. And then he looks through the telescope and he says, I can't see anything. He is too far away. He looks like a fool. But how often do we look like this? Because we say, I don't know where God is. I don't know where God is. For my personal testimony, it's a lot easier to see God. Especially in this situation, if you had someone looking from the other side of the telescope to tell you, he's right in front of you. Sometimes we just need that second vantage point. I'm one of these people who always wants to be in control. Just like my brother, I like to write things down. Like, okay, I'm going to wake up at this time, then I'm going to go to class, I'm going to go to class, I'm going to eat lunch, I'm going to work out, I'm going to take a nap, then I'm going to practice. Like, set it all up perfectly. When you do that, you put a stranglehold on your time. Everything has to be just perfect, and you don't leave room for God to work. How many times do you hear that God works in a mysterious way? Well, for God to work in a mysterious way, you have to give him the opportunity to work. And that's the thing. And the thing that I've really realized on this journey that I've been on the last year, it's really cool when things just fall into place. And it's really neat when there's perfect timing. But the greatest feeling in the world is knowing that my plan for my life is aligned perfectly with the plan of the God of the universe. It's not happening just perfectly. It's not everything just falling into place. It's not perfect timing. It's God saying, Brandon, I have a good and a pleasing and a perfect plan for you. Not for anyone else, but this is your path. This is your path. The greatest feeling in the world is knowing that your path is aligning with God. And when that doesn't happen, it's confusing, and it's depressing, and it's terrible. Become like a child, and you'll see that God's path is right there in front of you. The greatest illustration that I heard of this came from a man named Steve Johns back at school. And my family's probably really tired of hearing about Steve, but I tell them still. But I had been praying that God would give me someone to talk to our group at school. someone that would just be a different voice and would share their wisdom with us. Well, I met this man at church. His name's Steve. He's a very godly man. He sits in the front row, and he's one of those guys that said, yes, with a very deep voice. Perfect for like a movie scene in a church. That's Steve to a T. Yes, God, yes. And before we knew Steve, we always were like, wow, that's really cool. But as it turned out, I was praying for a guy to come and speak to our group there. And as it turns out, Steve was praying for a group to preach to. And suddenly we met. And he came and he started preaching to us, and he was telling me about his son. And if you don't think God brings us together for a reason, here's your proof. Steve and his wife had a son. His name was Brandon. Steve's son got sick and passed away the same exact year I was born. And somehow we came together 21 years later. Well, at the time, Steve's working a job making minimum wage, and his son gets sick and he racks up all these hospital bills before his son passes away. Well, the time came when the accountant of the hospital called and he said, Steve, we need to meet with you and figure out a plan for you to pay this. He looked at the numbers and he knew he'd never be able to. He could pick up a second or a third job and it still wouldn't amount to enough money. But he sat down and he prayed. And he said, God, whatever you want me to do, I will do it. If I have to pick up a third job, I'll do it. Whatever I need to do, I will gladly pay this bill however I can, if that's part of your plan. So Steve walks in, very calm. Everyone else that had been there, he said, was very anxious and frustrated. And he sat down with the financial director of the hospital. And he explained his financial state to her. And she looked at him and kind of looked down at the numbers. Looked at him. Then looked down again. And then finally, she looked at him and said, there's something different about you. I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something different. And she looked at her papers again and said, the hospital will be writing you off your bill. We'll take care of it. You're free to go. You talk about a man who is just as in Romans. Sorry, technical difficulties. Just as in Romans, who said no to the ways of this world, renewed his mind amidst tragedy, the worst a parent could go through, but took on his cross and walked with it. He embraced it. And he said, God, I'm going to follow you. I'm going to trust you with childlike faith. I'm going to bear this cross and follow every day. And he prayed. And he sought the counsel of others, and he read his word. And God looked down on him and said, Steve, this is my plan for you. My good, pleasing, and perfect plan. Plan not to harm you, but plans to prosper you, to give you hope and a future. It's truly amazing what faith can do. So now as we leave here today, I'm going to challenge you. It's a very simple challenge, a challenge that I often offer to people at school. And it's simply this. Take a chance. Don't worry about the scheduling of tomorrow. Don't worry about what you have to get done at work. But come to God like a child. Give it to Him. Be willing to be used. Commit anything you do to Him. Seek His word. Bear that cross. And just wait and see what God's perfect, pleasing, and good plan is for your life. Because there is no better feeling in the world than knowing that this is the path the Lord has made for me. made specifically for you. A good, pleasing, and perfect plan. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just come before you today in pure amazement at the works that you can do in our lives. It's so easy to sit here and think, God, you're absent from my life. I can't see you when you're standing right in front of us, Lord. It's so easy to say, you know what, I'm going to do my own thing. I can control my life. I'm the one in control. And Lord, we sit there and we spin our tires, not knowing what to do. We're lost, we're anxious, we're depressed, we're crying, reaching out for you, Lord. God, your plan for us is perfect. It's absolutely perfect. And I pray, Lord, today that you would just move in the hearts of your people. Help them to see that it is not our plan, but it is your plan, Lord. In our hearts, we establish our course, Lord, but you establish our steps. Lord, I just thank you for this opportunity to come here and speak to your people. I pray, Lord, that you would just move in the hearts here. Help them to know and to feel your love. I just thank you for everyone in this room who put aside every worry that they had and took that first step to honor you. I pray, Lord, for your protection as we go out today. And I pray that we will be able to see that everything in this world is a manifestation of your glory. That you, Lord, are the light of this world. I pray, Father, for our nation, as we're turning away from your light and we're starting to walk into darkness. I pray, Lord, that you would help this nation to seek that light that only you can provide. Let it be a lamp to our feet. Let it guide our path. And Lord, I pray that as we leave this building, that we would be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Do not let us succumb to the pressures of this world, the earthly sins that just eat at us, Lord. But I pray that you would just help us to rise above that and to just lean on you. Lord, you bless everyone so much in this room. I pray that you would just help us to have that childlike faith, to lean on you, and to trust you, Lord. I pray for each and every person in this room that you would just bestow your blessings upon them, Father. I thank you so much for the opportunity to come here and preach. And I pray, Lord, that you would just continue to move in these people. Make them move for you, Lord. Help them to see that you have a clear, perfect path for their lives, Lord. Thank you so much for this day. May all the glory and honor go to you for everything that we say and everything that we do. And all God's people said, Amen.